see if I can stream on 4 things. Live stream. YouTube Live. Yeah, it was pretty embarrassing. But you know what? Maybe now more people understand that pelvic floor therapy is a thing you might need after the Army, or having a baby, or being in labor for 30 hours, or running 6 marathons. Let's talk about VA disability. Next. Public. Don't schedule it. Okay. Whew. Okay. Now we're going to try YouTube. And then we're going to fix the book. Until they all start echoing through each other, and then it's not able to work. Is probably what's going to happen, but we'll see. Okay. Okay, my thing. Let's try to look down here. Okay. YouTube, hi. Hello, I'm so glad you caught us too. Every Friday at noon with interesting people. Okay, kind of spoony. I'm ready when you are. And it with 4 needles and freak everybody out today. Or I'm going to drop them on the floor. Oh, yes, share the live. Hi, Greg. Thanks for being here. Greg, are you able to pin the book from the marketplace as a moderator or no? Probably not. I'm going to see if Spoonie's able to do it. Hi, Deb. So it's in Marketplace, search Uncultured, and it's on affiliate sales. If people buy it from you, you'll get like $3 for each book. I'm still in the TikTok excommunication box, supposedly permanently. But I've been told that by the end of August, maybe I'll get my shot back. Thank you so much. Gotta try to start Instagram. And I thought TikTok was the craziest about the monetization, but on Instagram, literally every single topic I talk about gets kicked out as not being monetizable. So that's fun. But this is why I'm doing a lot of Patreon stuff now. So hi.
Hello.
Hi. Oh no, can't see the book. Okay, there it is.
Nice. Mic check, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Nice. I got you perfectly
Hopefully we can hear it on the other ones. Okay, so let me just explain. So I am Daniela, scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership. Thank you for being here. Every Friday at noon EST on my TikTok channel, I have an interesting guest on to have an interesting discussion. And we really run the range of things. Today, well, we're going to find out about Kind of Spoony, and we are also going to talk about VA disability. Is that correct? You're a lawyer?
No, I'm a patient.
Okay.
I'm just a guy with a lot of ideas at the moment, but
perfection.
We'll talk about it all.
Yes, let's talk about it all. Can I ask you a favor?
Yep,
are you able to go to your shop?
Yes.
Or your business and search for Uncultured in products?
Okay, so if I go to...
Hi, Bren. What happened to the disrespectful people?
Let me see.
I don't know who
Is
was being
that going to
disrespectful.
be? I have not used. I have a business account, but I haven't actually used it
You
for
haven't?
business.
Okay, so you can't search the marketplace. You can't like pin any products.
No, I
Okay.
haven't done that.
That's fine. Yeah, I'm in TikTok's excommunication box, which is definitely kind of culty.
Yeah.
It's interesting because on Instagram, they'll be like, nope, your content's not monetizable, and they'll take it off. On TikTok, they'll do that and they'll give you violations, and then they'll just
look, you know what it
suspend
is?
you.
Probably is that I'm about to hit 10K like now. I'm at like 9,095 followers. So probably in this live, I'll hit 10K,
you
and
should
then
go.
maybe I'll have that option.
So you should go apply for a shop. I think it's 5K, so I think you might be able to do it now. But anyway, so do you share your name, or do we just call you like Spoonie? Okay.
No, let me introduce myself. So my name is Brian, and I go by kind of Spoonie here on TikTok. And I've led an interesting life. I was born into a military family as the son of a CH-46 pilot in the Marine Corps. And
What just happened? Stop.
The favorite question that I think you mentioned this in your book. Oh no, did I lose you?
No, we're back. Sorry.
No, you're there with me.
I'm just showing the other platforms who you are. They called you the man with the nice voice.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So, oh my goodness.
I'm sorry. That was just
no. So the question, where do you live or where do you come from? Right. My answer has always been I'm a geographical mutt. I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, moved to Pensacola, Florida, Corpus Christi, Texas, San Diego, California, lived in Okinawa, Japan for 4.5 years through second grade, moved to Cuba, lived on Guantanamo Bay for 2 years, and then moved to the States for the first time at 11. Lived in North Carolina, went to high school, moved to Louisiana, and then I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served for 8 years, going all over the place. And when I got out, I moved to Washington, which is where I live now. And
Washington, D.C. or Washington State?
State.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes, I do need to do a better job of specifying that. And then I worked for, I became a mechanical engineer. I worked on startup, on industrial construction projects. So my first project was at the Hanford Nuclear Waste Treatment Plant, which is where they're taking the nuclear waste left over from the Hanford site that built our nuclear arsenal and taking that liquid nuclear waste and processing it into glass. And I did that until I became sick with shingles, and then my health really started to nosedive. And I found out that I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. That is my new cult that I represent is the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome kind of group, and especially the underrepresented men's side of our condition. So that is me, and that's how. And so 2 years ago, whenever I first started interacting on TikTok, that's how I found out about EDS, and that's what led to my diagnosis. And being the resourceful person that I am, I managed to find the #1 surgeon in the world who operates on people with my condition. And I've shared the procedures that he's done on me with TikTok for the last 2 years. So it started in August of 2022 with my right hand. And since then, I've had my right hand rebuilt, left hand rebuilt, right leg and left leg nerve releases in 2023. I had a finger revision surgery in February of this year and just had my ankle rebuilt in March. And now we're getting ready to do my right shoulder.
Wowza. By the way, if you go to down in your corner where it says more, you can unmirror your video and then everyone will be able to see that shirt.
Ooh, Okay.
And
there we go.
if it's helpful for you, you can also swipe the comments across the screen. You'll still be able to see the background, but your comments will show up bigger. So some very interesting things we have in common is, first of all, just being third culture kids, right? I was born in the Philippines. I grew up mostly, so it's Philippines, Japan. Got deported from Japan when I was about 3 because cults. Something I lied about.
We were very close in age, so that means that we were
in Japan at the same time.
92, 91?
Yep, we left in 90. I want to say we left in 90 or 91. Yeah, because I'm 37. And then I went to Peru for a year, and then I went to Brazil for 10 years, and then I went to the US for the first time when I was 14 years old. And then Mexico, and then, got kicked out of the cult at 15 and dropped off on a stepsister's doorstep in a whole new planet, the great state of Texas. I'm married to a CH-47 pilot, CH in the Army. He retired out of special operations, and now he's going to go try to solve world hunger with
wop, wop, wop.
Urban agriculture and global poverty. There was something else that you said. And then also, we're both disabled. I'm 100% disabled. Are you 100% disabled? No, not yet. Wow. So we definitely need to talk about all of this.
Yeah. And then I forgot to mention, whenever I did get out, one of the next cult that I joined was the Veterans Court in my community. It's scary how similar and how passionate people get drawn into passionate causes, and this is one that I'm very proud of, and it's worthy of spending my time helping other people doing it.
Well, and let's pause and talk about that. I just want to say I'm one that likes the shirt. First of all, this is a chapter title in my book, came out of a PTSD statement that I filed for the VA, and you can buy these shirts in my links if you are interested. So nonprofits, right? Or the veteran world, right? I also did that. So I got out. Oh, that was the other thing, is that my husband's from Washington. So we were in Washington State. That's where he retired out of JBLM, and then we left. And now we're in Washington, D.C. But I got out of the Army and had a baby, and so here was my thing, right? I didn't realize this yet, but cults train you to have this mission, right? The mission, the purpose, the community, they're such drivers. Often when we get out of the cult, we're just oh, the cult was bad, but I missed the mission and the purpose and community. And what I think happens a lot of times is we don't realize that we were set, our meters for mission and purpose and community were set so high that in itself was unhealthy, right? It's not healthy to always, always, always sublimate the self and put the group before yourself. But that's what we do, right? So I described it as so I was a missionary kid, right? And cults also make you think you're better than everyone. So I was a missionary kid, so I was better than you. And then I was a straight A student, so I was better than you. And then I was a soldier, so I was better than you. And I was a super soldier, so I was even better than the other soldiers. And then I got out of the Army and had a baby and started working at Microsoft. And there was nothing that made me better than anyone else. And I started falling apart. And just, also the mission, also right? I was just and I had a good paying job, right? I was telling myself, you should be able to hang by your thumbs for this 6-figure job. And I just couldn't do it. And I had to go. This is when I quit. I went into the veteran services world over there in Washington, which, by the way, there are more veterans that leave the military and end up in Washington state than anywhere else, including Washington, D.C. There's 18 Army bases there, and it's lovely there. But so it's interesting because as cult scholar, right, we know that nonprofits can be very culty and often very damaging. However, I believe that when a veteran gets out of the military, there's this 2-year window. And if you don't find another mission and purpose and community, it's going to take you a decade or two to like reset your meters down to normal. And so you need to find something. And I mean, the 2 years is just kind of my experience, but people start getting really desperate in this second year, not finding what they want. And so I'm often recommending to veterans, like go volunteer with a veteran service organization, because you're at least going to have a bit of some of that community back while you figure it out. But also we are very, very, very kind of open to being used and abused because of our work ethic, right? And this is why Amazon loves to hire veterans, because they know they can just work them into the ground and they'll do it.
Hey, whenever I got shingles and left my construction job, I went to work for AWS. So I've been in that cult too.
Yep.
It's so you hit on a ton of stuff that's similar. First, I just need to say, for all the similarities, there's so much that is different, and your book is very eye-opening. And I, to be honest with you, I had to do a lot of internal reflection just to bring myself to read it, even though I've been a follower of yours for 2 years and have kind of watched your videos to help me not become a cult leader as I've built this TikTok following. And I'm glad that I did read it. And
Thank you.
I don't want people to get the wrong impression, because I had a lot of support and people along the way that put me in positions to excel. And I don't think that there's anything necessarily special about me. It's just that I had the right opportunities, right?
Right. And that's such a good thing to acknowledge, by the way. Our privilege in being here and getting here. Next week, I'm going to have a guest called April speaking, and she is a Black woman creator. And we are going to just be deconstructing white supremacy out loud, just like we do with cults. So stay tuned for that. What you said about the not becoming a cult leader, right? So I have the Guru Gotcha checklist. You can, if you're on TikTok, you can search #GroupBehaviorGal, Guru Gotcha checklist. I'm in a fuzzy purple coat. And I say, I built that for me, right? I was so against the idea of thought leaders. I don't like it. I think it's culty. They're called followers. And so I was like, these are the signs that I see. These are the signs that I'm not going to do. For example, right now I'm launching not one, but 2 podcasts, Cults and the Culting of America, and another podcast called Hey White Women with White Woman Whisperer. And so because we have these big communities, some people are volunteering to help me do production to get it off the ground. And I am very strict that I will not go more than 3 months with volunteer labor, because free labor and exploitation of labor is such a big part of coercive control.
Well, and we're giving from ourselves, and it's important to have somebody at the top that understands that other side of it, because if you just think that that's how the world works, is people just give you free labor, then you are the exploiter.
Exactly. And that's the kind of thing that happens a lot that I see in, I think, nonprofits across the board, but I think veteran nonprofits are pretty bad at this because they have, again, a population that is trained. In the military, you don't just miss a deadline.
We have the conditioning to, you put, life, the question of life's in jeopardy, and we are trained to go into that next level. I mean, I kind of think of it as, in a lot of ways, boot camp, our training, and then especially if you go on to then use that training at an operational level, you're kind of accessing parts of the human mind that not a lot of people get to have installed, right?
Yeah, but also we are trained to like, again, just like give and give and give and never, like we're never getting back, right? So one of my big things with the military is like deadlines, right? Like when something needs to be done, you're just there until it's done. We used to just joke all the time that like it's not a field exercise until the intelligence officer's crying in the corner because she's been up for 72 hours. And so funny, like every single person in the publishing industry congratulated me on meeting the deadline for the book that they paid me tons of money to meet the deadline. And I was like, what? By the way, you can get autographed copies of my book in my links. And they're like, yeah, like nobody meets deadlines. And the same thing in the workplace. I was somebody's business manager. And so I'm like, hey, I need these reports. And people just like, oh, that's not a priority for me, but one of the problems
I moved up to lead engineering role. My degree is in project management.
Yeah. And, one of the problems in the military that's slightly better in the workplace is like, if it's not a life or death situation, we're still working that hard. We're still on those same stupid deadlines. I'll never forget my husband worked for the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. And this is the helicopter unit that was created after the Iran hostage crisis went poorly. And they were like, it doesn't matter how many special ground guys we have, we need special air guys too, right? So he goes to work
this is one of those really specialized roles that the Army has, and the Marine Corps has a few units like this. And, this is something that we do a poor job as veterans describing, when we say, because I'm an aviation Marine and, deployed with jet units, but that's nothing like what your husband's unit was, which is this legacy mission that has its own layer of, history.
Oh, yes. And its own cultiness. And, I always joke that like every branch of the military has their special ops and they all argue about whose is better. But people will buy me drinks in a bar just for being married to the guy that flies in to get him out of fire, right? But so here we are, we're in this unit, we're in the middle of the surge. My husband has literally been in the Army since 9/11. And this is like 15th, 16th year in. He's been to war for 5 years total, right? He's in a unit where they're gone 6 to 9 months out of the year. And then they're home one day and he's like, oh, sorry, babe. Like, I'm not going to be home for a week because we got to get this helicopter, up and running. And I was like, why? And he was like, because it's down. And I said, okay, walk me through this. Like, is it going to Afghanistan? No. So it's a lieutenant colonel. It's a 37-year-old dude who has decided that this needs to be done right now on this schedule. And that these guys that are gone 50 to 75% of the year of their home just need to work through the night to get this done. Right. So it's like funny. This, right? It's this kind of stuff, which is, this is cult-like, where it's all of the time, 100%, all of the time.
Have you read the new book that came out called 53 Days on Starvation Island yet?
No.
It's the story of Marine Corps aviation on Guadalcanal, and where my unit, I'm BMA 223 because they upgraded to Harriers. Back then it was, World War II. So a lot of anything you could grab. And they like helped fend off all the Japanese until more Americans could get there and stuff.
Tell us more about.
Same kind of thing. Got to have the aircraft up. Always. Fully mission capable aircraft is what you need.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And no, I was going to say, and where you think like it would get less crazy when you're not at war, often it gets more crazy with like more ridiculous stuff and taking. And
one of the great ironies that, I experienced because my dad was in the aviation community and I used to be on the side of it where you're focused on, especially growing up as a kid and kind of a explosive time, right? My dad was in from 90 no, 89 to 09. Went all through the invasions and,
Wow.
Deployed multiple times, and then I went right after. So
Yeah.
yes, I am a Zia. I saw that. Whoever's asking. Yes.
And I was in aviation as well, I should say. Like I was the aviation intelligence officer. And I would say the most fun part of my career was like, so when I get out of the Army, 6.5 years as a captain, for 5 years, like my specialty is things that kill helicopter pilots in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get out and have a baby, and I'm at home as a government trained expert on how my husband can die.
I would not want to know the things. So my intel street cred, when I was going for re-enlistment, there weren't enough boat spaces for my MOS. So I tried out for counter intel and got accepted, and then decided to stay in my MOS because they found more space. So I tried. I got told, yeah, you can. And then I went, oh man, I think that I love my marriage. And so I didn't do it.
Yeah, that's a good decision. Intel is fun. So the problem was like, if you enjoy your job as an intelligence officer or analyst, you only get to do that job when you're at war. So it's like, you only get to do your job when your life sucks. When you're back home, you're in charge of locked doors and secret clearances, and it's like super boring, but your life is better. But what's fun for me, okay, so in my book, I called it spy school, like intelligence school, spy school. And yeah, I'm a spy. It's kind of a joke, right? I have this cup. I have a little, from the Rangers that I patrolled with, I have a little Ranger tab that says spy on it. It's always kind of been the thing. People get so mad at me. Oh my God, Twitter just like tried to destroy me. You're not a spy, blah, blah, blah. And it's just funny to me because I'm like, y'all, the literal highlight of my career was taking my mom and my brother to the International Spy Museum in DC and pointing to what I did. Like, we are the military spies. It's just that spying doesn't look like what it looked like in World War II, right? It's very different. But it's interesting for me because I've always been just kind of the professional Cassandra, right? Looking at the bad guys. And the interesting thing is, of course, nobody likes Cassandra, right? Like nobody likes the person that's always talking about how you're going to die.
We were, I was the, cheeky corporal and sergeant that was printing out the Daesh newsletters whenever they were making them in like 2011, 2012, and leaving them around the ready room for people. There were, good quality propaganda there. The CO wasn't happy when he found out that that's what, those new magazines in the ready room were, but,
No,
it's fun.
Of course not. Can you tell us a little bit more about your disease, why you're calling yourself a zebra, and like, how did that show up in your career or after your career? Yeah, sure. Just tell us a little more.
So I have a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and it is an inherited connective tissue disorder, meaning that I've had it my whole life. Basically, there's something in my genetic code doesn't code properly for the protein collagen. Collagen in your body is kind of like the stuff in between. It makes up what we call the intracellular matrix, okay? And what that means for me is that my tissue is stretchy. And so as a kid, it was actually a benefit. I, grew up the son of a Marine, right? So I grew up boxing in backyards, and then moved into wrestling and jiu-jitsu, and, really spent my youth fighting because I was very flexible. You can't tap me out. I'm like the rubber band man. Right? And we find that a lot in people with this condition, where they're dancers, ballet dancers, they're soccer players, they're
gymnasts,
track athletes, that just all of a sudden it seems like their body falls apart and everybody's going, what's going on? what they fail to realize is that this person has actually been living with this condition and putting themselves under that mental strain to live up to the expectations of the outside world because you don't know that you're sick. And
sounds like
all crashes
autism
down-
and neurodiversity.
Well, and it's about 70%, I think, of the population is diagnosed with EDS and ADHD or ASD. I was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, and then was late diagnosed with autism when I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Because it was actually my surgeon. He was like, "Hey, number one surgeon in the world for this condition." And he's like, by the way, these are the things you need to look for. You should get evaluated for autism.
Yeah. Huh. That's fascinating. Yeah. I was diagnosed with autism when readers of my book told me, you should look into this.
Right.
I wasn't actually ever formally diagnosed, but we call it a crowdsourced diagnosis because at this point, so many, probably thousands of mental health professionals have either read or like listened to me talk. And they're like, yeah, we can tell.
Yeah. And we can talk about that side of things more. Let me get back to physical because I want to get back to your original question about how did it show up and affect me, right? So because I had that background and I had that kind of mentality, the wrestler's mentality, and I had that practice of just sucking it up, combined with my background. When I was 10 years old on Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, I had my own horse in the stable called Festus, and I was best friends with the colonel's son, and we went golfing with him on Sunday mornings. So like I was steeped in Marine Corps, almost Victorian-esque kind of patriarchy upbringing, right?
And by the way, for those who don't know, the Marine Corps is absolutely by far the cultiest of the branches.
And we're proud to say it.
When I did my TED Talk, I asked people, I was like, because it was about transition. I was like, probably none of you have left a cult, right? And I was like, except for one of my 24 siblings. And so afterwards, this Marine with the big beard, right, comes up to me. And he's like, I was going to raise my hand. I was like, don't worry, Tim. I had an answer for if a Marine raised their hand.
Yeah, it is a cult. And you do have to deconstruct.
Which, by the way, I 100% was going to join the Marines because I wanted to be like, I wouldn't have called it the cultiest, but like I wanted to be the most hardcore. I ended up in the Army because of a, toxic marriage, and I'm very glad.
It's funny. I've had a lot of time to reflect since getting sick and I do a lot of reading. During my hand surgeries, I couldn't read. I couldn't read, and I hadn't really been reading for years. But I fell back in love with it because of audiobooks and because you can listen to them at 2 or 3 times speed. And so I've had a lot of time to reflect and deconstruct. Right, deconstruct my religious upbringing in Southern Baptist, culture.
Yeah.
And I was watching something the other day where you're speaking to somebody from a Pentecostal church, which is interesting because my grandparents were heavily involved in the Pentecostal church.
Yeah, and that's my partner on Cults and Culting of America is someone who grew up in the United Pentecostal Church, which is like his sort of cult. But so did you listen to my book or did you read it?
I listened.
Okay. Yeah. I love when people listen because recording that audiobook was like one of the hardest things I've just had to do and get through. And when we talk about I'm calling this the like Cinderella effect, at least in my stand-up, but I think like cult babies and veterans, we all have this thing where like, no matter what we are going through physically, mentally, emotionally, like when it's go time, we turn on and we go perform, right? I can do it with a broken heart. And I have been like really, really bad at this.
Well, I look back at my TikToks where I'm like 48 hours out of surgery and giving full anatomical lessons on, what was just operated on me from reading the notes. And I'm like, man, it would be so much easier if I, just took some painkillers and went to sleep.
Yeah. I ran 3 marathons where I was breastfeeding at the finish line. So trust me, I get the the ridiculousness, right? But this is also a very, very common thing I have found, is to go from like high control childhood into high control military. But what I was going to say about the audio, it was this thing where it was like, I had 5 days. I had to do it. It had to get done on this schedule. And even though on Wednesday night, it felt like it was killing me, you just have to push through. So anyways, I feel like a piece of my soul is in that audiobook.
Well, okay. So your audiobook, yes, I listened to it, and your performance was amazing. And this will be kind of like my weird compliment about it. Like, your performance itself was so good and clear that I could listen to it at 3 or 3.5 times speed. Wow. And can hear through it, which I can't do with all narrators. So you did an excellent job.
It was a very
on the meat of it, but on the delivery and on the performance.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a very nice full circle moment for me, because I'm not a bad voice actress. First of all, I had an Audible account for 14 years before I got to see my own audio on Audible. So it's like, I know the narrator voice, but because of the cults and then later the army, I have been speaking and on cameras and everything since I was 1 year old, right? That's what the cover of Uncultured is, which you can get autographed copies here, is, me dressed up as a soldier of love for Jesus as a 2-year-old. I just look older because the picture's stretched. But so anyways, yes. And the audio got it recommended twice in the New York Times. The audio gets almost exclusively 5-star reviews, where when people read it, it's different. But the wonderful moment for me was I have this skill because of those motherfuckers. And now I am using that skill. You get paid as the voice actress, by the way. I'm using that skill to read this book for global consumption, about them. And,
that's really cool.
I can't say this enough. We talk about the power of owning your story in this healing way. And we don't talk about the power of literally owning your story. That is a product. I didn't get to choose most of that stuff, but that is a product that I now sell. I'm owning my story every time I make money on social media. You are getting there too. And I always tell people it doesn't fix what happened, but it sure can buy some time for time and space for healing. Which is very nice.
We share a love of Greek philosophy, and Marcus Aurelius says it really well. Basically, let the threads of fate, your life, be spun out, and it's so much more fun when you stop trying to predict what's going to happen, and you own your story. You strip off all of the legacy baggage that you've been carrying.
And also you owning your story means you got to choose how to tell it, right? Uncultured is not just how my life happened. Uncultured is a very, very planned book. And by the way, if you're a subscriber on TikTok or Patreon, which are in my links, you can participate in my series that I'm making on how to turn your life story into a memoir, if that is what you want. Because there's a craft to it, right? And it's so one of my favorite quotes is, a good memoir doesn't just tell you a story, it tells you how to feel about that story. And we actually tried to sell this book in 3 different ways. We're first it's about group behavior. That didn't sell. So we're okay, it's about female friendships. And that didn't sell. And then we brought in a proposal doctor, and she was like, no, it's about group behavior and female friendships. Let's go. But one of the things that you said, and one of the reasons that I wrote Uncultured, and that I'm really, really gratified, is that, people that grew up in the Baptist church, people that grew up in all of these single family cults or regular churches in America that had just as culty of a childhood as I did. And I know that because I hear y'all's stories, right? And I've actually written this quote that I'm going to put on an Alice rock climbing out of the rabbit hole painting, but it just says, she pulled herself from the rabbit hole only to find that they thought their world was reality, and this is why I'm writing a book called The Culting of America. But the reason I wanted to write it is, I'd actually had a white Christian male, straight Republican tell me like, a nice girl from Milwaukee with nothing bad, who's never had anything bad happen to her, can't understand like being in a sex cult or being a woman at war. And I'm like, well, first of all, I reject the concept that there's a nice girl from Milwaukee that has never had anything bad happen to her. But like, nobody else can understand anyone else's story if all you're giving is the high line, right? And this is something that both cult survivors and veterans struggle with, right? Because they're like, oh, nobody's been through this. Nobody can understand. And the thing I realized, and fortunately, since I'm a storyteller and a writer, I have like the ability to do it, is like, well, but if you tell the story down to the individual experiences, the feelings, the emotions, the despair, the fear, right? Other people can relate to it. And the power of my extreme story, whether it is talking about cults or deconstructing racism or whatever it is, it's like, we can all agree that my life, like this was a cult. Yes, bad cult. And then it's kind of like, well, if you're relating to it, maybe your experience was much more cult. And the thing is just that you don't understand what a real cult is like, right? Because everyone thinks of it as this like boogeyman thing.
Yeah. And I think that I think that as you mature, you come to realize that the stories as they're told look differently when they're being lived.
Oh, so much.
And until you've seen that happen, maybe a few decades in a row, you're still new to the game.
And also, everyone's story is different, right? So that's the thing that I have really, really learned. So first of all, people are like, oh my God, how did you write so good as a 6-year-old? I was like, 1, because I had a 5-year-old and that was heartbreaking. But 2, I'm writing as a 33-year-old, right? Like 6-year-old me wasn't like, then they hit me. But the thing they don't tell you about the shepherd analogy is that the shepherd always eats his sheep in the end, right?
Right.
So like that's your ability as the memoirist going back, right? Like I am crafting a story. I just released a whole nother memoir called Un-American, but it's only as a video of me reading it, available in my links or on my Patreon.
And I have,
and it's a different story of my life, right? Same life, different events. Some of them are even the same events, but it's looking at completely different things, right? This time it's looking at power and privilege and whiteness and otherness. And so that is how you like guide people to tell your story. But anyway, all that to say, I was really trying to show some specific things. And one of the things that I myself learned was that, not only, yes, are there very valid parallels between cult and military, but like many, many, many of us do this. And it's not like we don't think of it as a hard thing, right? Like when you had a child across the board, nobody that I've met that has come from a high control childhood or narcissistic family and went into the military had a hard time in the military at all. Like I was not asked to do
honor graduate out of boot camp, honor graduate at A school, honor graduate at C school, honor graduate at corporal's course, all with meritorious promotions. When I went to college, I went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University online. Well, it was a hybrid campus on base. Did all my degree online, graduated with a 4.0 while an active duty sergeant, running my shop, filling the billet, 3 spaces above me.
Yep.
Got out of the military on my second enlistment with promote ahead of peers, fit rep. And
this level of
perfectionism.
This level of perfectionism tends to come out of a childhood without unconditional love, right? We see this in children from high control religions. We see this in children of abusive parents. We see this in children of immigrant parents. I just met this amazing author, Prachi, and she wrote a book called They Call This Exceptional. And she's talking about having to leave the perfectionism standards of her Indian American family. And like our stories are so the same when we're talking about that, right? And I'm telling you, the first time I found out that depression could be a sign, or good grades could be a sign of depression, I was like, oh, they talk about that in the book Third Culture Kids, by the way, which if you've been a military kid, you've moved states, you're from a biracial family, or you grew up outside of your culture, like you're a third culture kid. And that experience of being an other, like impacted you so much.
I just got this.
Oh, his book is called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
If you are identifying specifically with the narcissistic parent, with the charismatic, especially if you're an officer's kid, like read this book. It's going to help you move on from the fact that your emotionally unavailable caretaker never grew the skills to be the person that you want them to be. Once you make that shift, man, it feels good. It feels good.
Yeah, my husband and I are doing a lot of work not to raise an officer's kid. I will tell you that. But I really believe that like any version of being held separate from the world as a child is harmful. And any version of having a job as a child means you don't get to be a child, right? Like when you're a Marine Corps officer's kid, your job is to not be a kid, right? Your job is to be like this perfect example, missionary kids, preachers' kids, right? And then of course actors and all that
I had
stuff.
to be good at wrestling.
Yep.
Because that was what that was Dad's favorite sport. I had to be getting good grades because obviously who gets out of that, right? It had to be the man of the house whenever Dad left.
Excuse me, are you on Instagram?
No.
Okay, so the lovely voiced man is kind of spoony on TikTok. We're not talking as much about VA disability as I thought, but it's still a phenomenal conversation. We'll show you off again.
I don't know how long we're going here. We've only got
this usually is always a 90-minute conversation. So at about 1:30 is my hard stop because children like to be picked up from school and stuff.
Yeah, right. Okay. That's fair. You're doing better than my mom. Anyway.
So for me, the bar was on the ground. So even though I had a very loving mom, but because of the cult, and actually the chapter 2 in my book is called A Tale of Two Mommies. And what it's about is that like, I think I say at the very end, like we suffered from having parents whose personalities were split. Let me see. It's really good. Sorry, let me just find it real quick.
No,
my Bible reference finding skills coming in handy.
There you go.
So I said, and so went my mother's generation, the elder second generation, where her experience of being sent from bed to bed, becoming pregnant, giving birth, nursing, and weaning constantly from her youngest years to the age of 37 was the norm rather than the exception. They were as they were programmed, disciples first, parents second. And as the third generation, the children of the children of the children of God, we bore the brunt of the split personalities of those who, in another life, might have loved and protected us above all. And I actually wrote an essay. You can find it if you search Medium and my name, for my mom once for Mother's Day. And it was called You Weren't the Best Mom in the World. And it was kind of a love letter to her and our relationship that we have now, that we are outside of the cult, but also dealing with the fact that I didn't get to grow up with my mom. I saw her for 1 hour a day because I was in this cult system.
My mom and I have a relationship that's growing since my, kind of world crashed around me in 2022. And it's because, when she said, I did the best that I could, I finally said, I don't believe you.
Right. And here's
right, and sat with her and helped her come to terms with that and go, okay, look, you guys stop this block so that you can see who I am.
Yeah, and that's like, so one of the biggest problems that I had with the like cult joiners, right? And this is the same thing, by the way, in racism for white people, right? Which is when you finally get to the point that you can start telling your parents about some of the abuses that you experienced in these groups that they raised you in, a lot of the times they just go straight to like, oh, but it wasn't my fault. Oh, I didn't know, right? Is what the children of God try to say. And I'm like, but you know now, right? Like, you know now, why are you not helping us now? Right. And that is the one thing that I give my mother so much credit for. Like, the whole reason that I could write this book and do this work is because my mom, once outside of the group, like, has made an effort to really be a parent and be the kind of parent that each of her children needs.
Yeah, I am the person I am because I have the mother that I had. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I think that my life is, while there's, again, Marcus Aurelius says it best, unfortunate that this has happened. No, fortunate that this has happened and I was able to bear it, that I was not shattered by the past or frozen of the future,
Wow.
because there's many others who would not have been able to,
and
sit here with a smile on their face and talk about, what I've been through or what you have been through.
You're so right. You're so right. And this, by the way, is kind of what my other podcast is going to be about, right? Is it so many white people, when we are told that something that we do or say is tied to white supremacy and this structural racism in this country, we get stuck on like, oh, but I didn't know, right? Like, I just recently had a video go viral about how when I moved to Maryland, I found out that I walked racist because I kept bumping into Black people, right? And I searched myself, I figured out why, I stopped doing it, but I still bumped into those Black people, right? Like, I still impacted them and their day, and my intent didn't matter at all. And that is actually how I catch myself sometimes. Like, a few months ago, I was like white womaned all over threads, and then I was taking too long to get it. And then when I caught myself sounding like the cult joiner parents who were like, no, but I didn't know, my intent was pure, I was like, oh, doesn't matter, right? Like, does not matter that my mom was also a victim of this cult. Her 8 children still all had their own abuses. One of us is not alive anymore, and this is one of those things too, where like, we try not to judge anyone for not being able to pay the exit costs to get themselves out of coercive situations. But if you don't pay the exit costs for yourself, then you're passing them on down to your children. And that's just the reality, and that is why so many times we lose our relationships with our parents when we start deconstructing. And I will say that, like, so in my book, in both halves of my life, like cult, I had my mom always in my corner. Army, I had this Colonel Scott Halter, who, like, to this day is still my mentor. And I got to write an extremely critical book and walk away with those 2 people still in my corner. But I didn't know that, right? Yeah. When I handed my mom the manuscript, I had no idea if I was going to have a mom after that. And I for sure thought I was going to lose the Colonel. Like, I cried a lot over it. And he came back and said, wow, this is exactly what happened. Use my full name. But I didn't know that, right? So you still, when you're doing this deconstruction work, when you're leaving the group, even when you're getting out of the military, you don't know if the veteran community is going to accept you on the other side, what you're going to find, what friends you're going to lose when you leave, right? You literally have to be willing to, like, walk through these transitions completely alone. And what happened with you and I think, is we just weren't given the choice, right? Our bodies were like, you're dealing with this.
Yeah, exactly. So as I started to get sicker and sicker, basically my gut motility just went to zero. So I wasn't passing food and I wasn't passing waste either. So that was just, really uncomfortable. I was having to use, TMI, but having to use an enema every week just to remove my waste, right? And I had POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is where blood pools in your legs and your brain sends a signal to your heart to speed up, to increase blood flow throughout your body, but your body can't because the blood is locked in your legs. This is something that happens because of the collagen deficiency.
Yeah, the woman who helped me write my book, she has POTS, and she was like going through getting diagnosed of that at the time.
Yeah, and if anybody's listening and they would like to know more, check out @KindaSpoony on TikTok, and I'm also posting on YouTube. And I do educational videos primarily about that condition, helping patients like myself get access to care through education, because when you are educated, then you can advocate for yourself.
Yeah. And this, by the way, since this talk I kind of erroneously titled VA disability, this is true for VA disability, right? Like, you have to advocate for yourself. And by the way, this is how we know that a system is broken, right? Like, your medical system is broken when you need to go out and get counsel on how to describe your own condition. Like, I literally walked away the first time with only 30% disability, 3 spinal fractures, service connected, 0%, because I didn't say the word spasm. Now, my medical records have 3 sets of 6-week dead man's profiles because of back spasms, but I didn't say that word.
Yeah. It's amazing. Mine is held up now because the VA disagrees with the #1 orthopedic surgeon in the world for my condition. He's literally the leading author on the article for how to take care of a patient with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you're in Washington State. So what you need to do is you need to go to the Puget Sound VA hospital. You need to go right at 8:00 in the morning, and you need to go to the VSOs who volunteer, and you need to go to the VFW one, and you need to talk to Randy. And Randy, you will wait 5 hours or something, and if he doesn't get to you by 1:00, you'll have to come back again. Randy will get you 100% disability, or he will at least. So Randy for 30 years was on the VA adjuster side. And now he works part-time helping soldiers get their disability, and he is wonderful.
I know that I'm going to get to 100% eventually, because the medical proof is there, and it's a matter of the system not accounting for the fact that we're extra flexible. Because if you had an injury like I did, I got outrated at 50% for my right shoulder, left knee, right ankle, depression, tinnitus, neck and back spasms.
Well, and the other thing that everyone needs to know, okay, so because someone here on my side is like, how do they substantiate their refusal? So usually when you go to the doctor, you're like, this hurts, right? I'm having this symptom. I'm not like, doctor, I need a breast exam because I can't play with my child, right? But at the VA, pain is not a diagnosis. Basically, they do not care how you feel, right? But the military or the VA will pay you for any condition that your military service caused or exacerbated. And so you have to tie, just 1 second. So I want everybody that goes through this process, especially if you have children, especially if you have a spouse, right? Every single thing that you talk about to that doctor, I can't stay on my feet to play with my children. I can't do blah, 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 blah. If you're filing for PTSD, having a spouse write a statement. If you have a child that's old enough, writing a statement. Current life effects is the only way they care about what you're going on.
So just to close the loop here. So, I've worked with some very experienced people, and basically where my case is at now is that the VA has tied themselves in knots, and they just disagreed with somebody that they shouldn't have disagreed with, and now I get to appeal it. And so right now, what I'm looking for actually is counsel who is willing to take on an appeals case with the possibility of setting case law for this condition. I want to push for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome to be added as a presumptive condition to the PACT Act, because we have symptoms that directly overlap with fibromyalgia, IBS, and chronic fatigue syndrome. But because we carry a diagnosis of Ehlers-Danlos, which is genetic, they can say that,
that the military didn't exacerbate it.
Exactly. And so, I'm sorry, I'm having to log back into this thing.
Are you okay?
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so now I'm at the point where I had my surgeon write a nexus letter where it says clearly that my service aggravated my condition past the normal course of progression, right? My Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is extremely progressed. That's why I'm the only person with this condition on TikTok who's having, 4 surgeries, 6 surgeries back to back, right? Now I'm looking for a lawyer that wants to represent me and do that next step, so that I did everything like a Marine. I documented everything like I'm supposed to, and I know that I can stand behind the case. But I also know when I've reached the limit of my skill set, and I'm also burnt out.
Of course.
I don't want to do it anymore.
Sorry, let me just say one thing real quick. So right now, if you're on my side, you can see the comments. There's April Rose speaking, who's just shared the live 3 or 4 times. Hi, April. April and I, next week, the 14th, we are deconstructing white supremacy out loud and in public. Please come join us. April has spent so much of her time over the last month sending me videos, educating me, having difficult conversations with me. And I think we're going to have a really, really good, my child's not going to be in school, so I can go longer, probably 2 or 3 hour chat about this. So very, very excited. Please tune in. And then, okay, so something I want to address, you said you're burnt out. I so get that. For most people, okay, what you're doing is a complicated appeal. And if they're telling you the military can't have exacerbated your condition, go get advice, okay? Basically, they have to pay you for any difference in your body since you were 18 or whatever age you joined, right? So
it's a break it, you buy it kind of thing.
Yes,
if you in the warranty, the VA is sometimes they can try to pick a fight on technicalities, and when you get into a nitpicky fight with somebody over their particular specialty, you're not gonna we're autistic people. We know what it's like to dig down and stand on a decision, and that's apparently what every decision rater is.
And so this is why, okay, so for Brian's special case, you're doing appeals, but for the most part, you do not argue with the VA. You don't go file an appeal. You wait for a year, and then you file new information. And they will also try to scare you that if you reopen your case, they can readjust everything. You just don't change what you said before about any of your stuff that has already been assessed, right? You go review your own first letter that you got, and by the way, in that letter that they're going to send you, it's going to tell you all of the categories, right?
And it will also tell you what you have to do to get to that next rating. And that is one area where I want more clarification for this syndrome specifically, because it's always a decrease in the range of motion.
Right. Yours is an
no
increase.
Understanding that my shoulder pops out of socket every time I go to sleep. And it pops right back in.
And so when you say that, when you talk to the doctor, you need to say it pops in and out of socket every time you go to sleep. And so you are not managing to get enough sleep, to keep a job, or to have good relationships with the people in your life. Right? Like that's the part you need to tack on to the end of the sentence. And then now I want to just do my little PTSD spiel, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So first of all, people, the statistic is that people who go through traumatic events, 10% will get PTSD, right? And obviously we know that any of those statistics is higher, right? Like it's probably 20%. But women specifically coming out of the military are showing up with 50% PTSD. And again, we know those are the only ones that are reporting it or that are getting assessed for it. So I realized recently that I kind of actually wrote a little map into PTSD filing claims in Uncultured. So when you go, by the way, if you are a woman and you don't have 50% for PTSD or 30%, like go file. Now's the time to file because they realize how much they have been fucking over women, right? So please go file. I'm walking a friend who's already had breast cancer, who doesn't have 100% through this now. And I have a folder on TikTok called VA Disability or something. And she's like being totally open about it. So as we're finding things out, we're putting it on there. But
awesome.
They tell you, right? They're like, oh, so what event caused the PTSD? And I'm like, what event? They're like, file a claim for every event. And I recommend that you do. Someone here is asking, how do you know if you have PTSD? There's a book called Trauma and Recovery that is incredible. It's from the 80s by Judith Herman. And it is the first time anyone qualified said rape trauma, which women and children tend to suffer, sexual violence trauma, and war trauma, which men tend to suffer, are the same thing. In my Veteran Woman Book Club support group, you can join that in the link. There's free seats if you can't afford the price. We are reading that book, right? Because it's like we have experienced oftentimes both of these kinds of traumas. But Google PTSD, Google what the VA considers PTSD and those symptoms, and then ask yourself if you have those symptoms. And the VA does not recognize complex PTSD. So you keep it to PTSD, even though for most of us, it's probably complex PTSD. But I'm telling you, like, if you can file 10 different PTSD claims, do it, right? Like, flood them with so much paperwork. And the second thing is you have to tell a story, and you're trying to make grown men cry, okay? That is a picture you are trying to paint. So just my overall book, right? People will literally say to me, I loved your book so much, it made me cry. I loved your book so much, it made me laugh. There's exactly one place. And so what I've come away with is if you can make people spontaneously emote, they will be like, damn, that's a good story, right? So I filed 3 different claims. I filed one claim for the war trauma that I went through listening to and responding to 10 people dying from my team. Okay, so that's one. And there were news stories about that, and you can document that. You still have to talk about how it affects you today. Okay. And then I wrote one for my actual sexual. Okay, so that war trauma became the chapter called A Day Memorialized. Like that story that I wrote out became the basis for what went in here. And then I did one for my sexual assault while deployed. And the story for that became the Us versus Them chapter, which ties it directly to my suicide attempt. If you have ever had any suicidal ideology, make sure you're putting that over and over and over again in your PTSD claims.
Call 988.
And
if you're in the moment, call 988.
Yes.
I know that, like, as much as we hate on the VA, if you are actively,
they will help you
in it, the person on the other end is going to be a human being who can listen to you cry and help you breathe and help you get through that moment. And then on the back end of it, they're going to document it.
Yes, exactly. And I'm telling you, my brother that I lost was the no, I'm fine. No, I'm fine. I don't have trauma. I don't want to take from anyone else. That is not what happens. You're not taking anyone else's money. This is a workers' comp claim. You are suing the military. It's just been done for you. And I like to say, I'm horrified to say that my brother, both from the cult and the military, was like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then we buried him, right? Like he was not fine. And he always would say, no one's going to understand me. I can't call these hotlines. And I was like, yes, you can't. People will understand you, right? Like
People will understand.
We've been through this stuff. So please go do that. Back to the PTSD claim. On my sexual assault, I also did two other things in that statement. I had my spouse write a statement about how it affected me. Three other things. I had the unit psych at the time, who I was still in contact with, write a statement about how it still affects me now. And then I wrote a whole separate part about how the fact that I had no evidence was part of the trauma, right? Because I was breaking the rules, there was no option for me to go report it, right? So not only did I not get help, did I not get care, I had to go work a freaking 18-hour shift the next day, right? And just be fine. So all of that, right, is in there. If you don't have evidence, tell them why you don't have evidence. Tell them what you were afraid of. Tell them what your sergeant said. Tell them how fucking awful your commander was. Tell the whole story, right? And then finally, I wrote a third statement that was basically saying the entire experience of being a woman in the Army was one constant sexual harassment and traumatic event. And that became the bitch chapter and the kind of whole theme for the second half of the book. So by the way, read my book. But yeah, story, right? Write 25 pages about your thing, right? Everything you want people to understand, make it a story, and you are trying to make them cry. You are trying to put them there in that room with you where you were assaulted, most likely by a fellow goddamn service member. Tell that story and do that for every single part.
And I can add for my, thank you for sharing. All of that is spot on. And my PTSD is not military sexual trauma, and it's not even combat trauma. It's from a training accident where I was leading a group of Marines on a strenuous hike and had to, carry somebody down a treacherous path. And
did you file for that?
We had to get evacuated. And I have filed it, and it's been denied once. And because what happened was we went back to base, and they came and evacuated us, civilians, ambulance, and gave us fluids and stuff, and dropped us off at the hospital.